to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can you please start the audio on the WebEx?
Steve is there.
Steve, we have our best people working on that. There we go. Can you hear us now, Steve? Very good. And that's why Doug's in charge. All right. Do we have anyone here for public participation? All right. Moving on then. We have our first budget. It will be a busy night here. So we have the veterans budget. And we have Chris Hanifin here, Director of Veteran Services, with us. Do we have a subcommittee report, Megan?
We do. So Brad and I met with Chris to discuss the FY25 Veteran Services budget. Looking over the budget, you'll see a contractual increase in salaries. There is a $450 increase in MELT as pre-COVID levels of necessary travel are back in place. And there is a slight increase in conference fees for a training that is required by the state for recertification. Special accounts now too?
The special accounts are included in the budget, so yes.
Okay. So there's a $3,000 decrease in the Veterans Aid line. This is a line item that varies from year to year based on the number of eligible participants in the program. The state reimburses 75% of costs, but the initial outlay must be in the budget explicitly. The budget request is $293,158, which is an increase of $4,511, or a 1.56% change, and the subcommittee voted 2-0 in support.
Great, thank you. Welcome, Chris. Would you like to add anything to that?
Nope.
Okay, very good. Do we have any questions or comments? I'll ask one. So just to make sure, the Veterans Aid line, that's the before reimbursement, so the actual cost to the town will end up being about 1/4 of that after the reimbursement.
That's correct.
Okay, great.
Move to approve?
Second.
Thank you. All right, and we do have a remote participant, so we're going to do roll calls here. So it'll be the same order each time, everyone. All right, Chris Campbell.
Yes.
Doug.
Yes.
Chris Delaney.
Yes.
Frank.
Yes.
Steve Moran.
Yes.
Megan.
Yes.
Rob.
Yes.
Ed.
Yes.
Roger.
Yes.
Chair votes yes. That is 10-0-0. All right, and you'll be staying here for disability access. And do we have a report?
So looking at over the Disability Access
Oh,
Commission.
excuse me one moment. This count 590, as everyone flips through.
We met to discuss the Disability Access Commission budget, Brad and I, along with Chris. There was an increase in salary both by contract and by increased hours, with a $175 change. The budget is for $1,183, which is an increase of $175, or 17.36%, and the subcommittee voted 2-0 in support.
Would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I don't like the fact that I'm over budget guidelines. So if we could do something about this budget. No, it is what it is. We increased the hours for the recording clerk due to more meetings. And like she said, there's an increase in the wage as well.
The extra,
I think we went from 28 hours to 32 hours, so we only increased it 4 hours.
the extra 175 or so probably won't put us over. Do we have any questions? Roger?
Just a real quick summary of the projects that the Disability Access Commission worked on this year.
So we partner heavily with the therapeutic rec specialty programs with the rec department. And leading up to this year, we were very conservative in regards to the projects that we did due to the fact that we weren't seeing virtually any increases in the handicap parking fine fund. And all of 2023, I'm sorry, yes, 2023, there was 21 total tickets that were written at $200 a pop. So we were operating on a budget for the handicap parking fine fund hovering between 80 and 90, maybe even up to $100,000. So we were fairly conservative in regards to projects that we did. However, Chief Brown and a few of the safety patrol officers have done a fantastic job in the last 6 months to where we're writing 21 tickets a month. And I think all of last year we brought in, with appeals, I think about $10,000. We gave away to the therapeutic rec specialty programs over $15,000. We're making probably about $6,000 or $7,000 a month in tickets coming in now.
Okay.
So projects moving forward this year is probably going to be significantly heavier than it was last year. But to date, last year, with the therapeutic rec specialty programs, we're supplementing all of their or not all of their programs, but a majority of their programs, so that the individuals that are paying the cost would be the equivalent of paying an ordinary program, where the therapeutic rec specialty programs are significantly higher in cost because of the technical support that is needed for them.
All right, thanks.
Great. Any additional questions?
Move to approve?
Second?
Thank you. All right, this is to approve disability access budget of $1,183. Chris Campbell.
Yes.
Doug.
Yes.
Chris Delaney.
Yes.
Frank.
Yes.
Steve.
Yes.
Megan.
Yes.
Rob.
Yes.
Ed.
Yes.
Roger.
Yes.
Chair votes yes. That's 10-0-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
All right. Next, we have Council on Aging, which is account 541, and we have Marge Jetman with us, the Director of Council. Do we have a report, Megan?
Yes, we do. So Brad and I met with Marge to discuss the Council on Aging budget as well as the local transportation accommodated account. So specifically the Council on Aging budget. Looking at salaries, you'll see that a retirement has resulted in a decrease of $14,018 in the full-time salaries line item, and part-time salaries are up by contract. The remaining line items are level funded. The budget request is for $462,697, which is a decrease of $4,751 for a percentage change of negative 1.02%. And the subcommittee voted 2-0 in support.
Thank you. All right. Would you like to add to that?
So we're busy. We're very, very busy. Our activity numbers haven't quite recovered from COVID yet, but they're higher than they were last year, so that's looking up. And our social services department is blooming, we'll say. They are extremely busy. We do have, we have 2 full-time social workers and a part-time social worker. We're having a little bit of trouble with the part-time social worker maintaining somebody, but we're working on it. So at the moment, we just have 2 full-time ones.
Great. Do we have questions?
Motion to approve?
Second?
Thank you. This is to approve the Council on Aging budget of $462,697. Chris Campbell.
Yes.
Doug.
Yes.
Chris Delaney.
Yes.
Frank.
Yes.
Steve.
Yes.
Megan.
Yes.
Rob.
Yes.
Ed.
Yes.
Roger.
Yes.
Chair votes yes. That's 10-0-0. And now the local transportation accommodated account, which is account 902. It's on the website under other accounts if you're having trouble finding it.
So again, Brad and I met with Marge to discuss the local transportation budget. Lyft rides and go-go rides are being used frequently, and People seem to be happy with them. The town is continuing to monitor both the usage and costs and is again requesting $100,000 for this year. The current estimate is that the local expense will be around $160,000, with $60,000 coming from the Beeline Fund. The subcommittee voted 2-0 in support.
All right, would you like to add to that, Marge?
What was that?
Would you like to add to that report?
I'll let John actually take that.
Sure.
Okay, John?
Just real quickly, we're still trying to see what the normal usage is going to be when we get to the point, right? I think for this year, the average cost, where I sent an email, I mean, the average ridership per month was, I think ironically enough, 1, 2, 3, 4, about 1,200 rides, which is outstanding. But that's up significantly than 12 months ago. So we feel like we'll have enough, asking for $100,000, we feel like we'll have enough between the balance that will be left over at the end of this year with the 100,000, plus the plan will be to use the TNC rideshare funds that we get back from the state to supplement it, again, probably for another year. And hopefully by then, we'll know what the normal costs are going to be going forward. But it's an outstanding program. It's obviously very popular, so we're very happy about that.
Could you say what the ridership number was again, please?
I think the average for this 6 months was just over 1,200 a month.
1,200 a month, okay. Yeah, I'm curious, in the town meeting, we had a 25K reimbursement, which we thought corresponded to 250,000 rides a year.
Correct. This is just our rides are 1,200. The rides on our program are 1,200 a month.
Right.
The reimbursement we get from the state is for all rides, not just our program. So if you take it from your house somewhere to the Boston Garden, say, we're getting 10 cents for that. But that's not through our program.
Ah, okay.
That's what I referred to. I'm sorry, for the TNC network is that's the state tax on each ride.
That makes total sense now. Okay. Thank you.
Move to approve?
Second.
Anything further? All right, this is to approve the local transportation accommodated account of $100,000. Chris Campbell.
Yes.
Doug.
Yes.
Chris Delaney.
Yes.
Frank.
Yes.
Steve.
Yes.
Megan.
Yes.
Rob.
Yes.
Ed.
Yes.
Roger.
Yes.
Chair votes yes. That's 10-0-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Mark.
much.
All right, next is the building inspector budget, which is account 241. And we have our building inspector, Mark Dupel, with us.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome. Do we have a report, Megan?
Yes. So Brad and I met with Mark to discuss the FY25 budget for the building department. Not a whole lot to say and not a whole lot of changes. There's a contractual increase in salaries. The remainder of the budget is level funded. And the budget request is for $737,940, which is an increase of $10,501 or 0.44%. And the subcommittee voted 2-0 in support.
Thank you. Would you like to add anything to that, Mark?
Nope, I think Megan covered it. But I'm open for questions if you'd like.
Very good. All right. Do we have questions regarding building?
I will if Frank doesn't.
I do it up.
Go for it, Frank.
Go ahead, Frank.
Sorry, not for me to say.
I'm with you, Roger.
You're giving me a hard time, by the way, in case you didn't notice that.
I picked it up.
Yeah.
On the full-time salary, so how many full-time people are in the department?
6.
6, okay. And are any of them A&P positions?
I'm the only
You're
one.
the only one?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so all these increases would be contractual, and you also come out of the A&P negotiated settlements, okay. All right, thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
Did you have something, Roger?
He didn't ask the question I thought I was going to ask.
Oh, well.
How's building permit activity? Good. I mean, it's holding, it's holding its own considering, who you talk to about what the economy is really doing. But I just wrote down some numbers just in case you asked me that question, because you called me and told me you were going to ask me that question. So,
He's clairvoyant.
What a giveaway.
so in calendar year 2021, we had just over 3,600 permits. In calendar year 22, we had 3,800 permits. And in calendar year 2023, we had 3,600 permits. So last year, we went down, 270 permits, but our fees actually increased because we raised the fees back in January of 2022. So our fees have, over doubled. So the activity is kind of the same, and it still holds the same so far this calendar year.
I guess a follow-up, are they the same kind of projects that are going on?
Pretty much. I mean, there's a couple of new buildings, but most of them are tenant fit-ups in the commercial area. They remodeled a lot of buildings because of the whole COVID thing, and they decided to change their focus, so to speak, into life science. So they remodeling a lot of existing buildings. Residential still the same. Either somebody's remodeling or they're tearing it down and building something bigger.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
So,
Frank.
related to that, Mr. Chairman, just if you can do it, the mix of residential versus any kind of commercial improvements that could require permitting, is a residential growing, flat, a lot? How do you picture it?
I would say it's just holding steady.
So the tear down rate's about the same? That's-
Yeah, I mean, I could look real quick. I was told you were only going to ask one question.
It's our fault because there's two of us, huh?
You didn't call up ahead of time, Frank.
36. Around the same. 42 in 2021, 39 in 22, 36 last year, and I think we may be around 8 so far this year. So, kind of the same.
John, itching to say something over there?
Go ahead,
I'll just
John.
add that I came up for two reasons. Anytime Mark's going to talk about numbers, I want to be right beside him. And the one thing that he left out was that we continue to talk. Back in COVID, we went down a local inspector. We reduced by one position. We keep it in the budget, just unfunded, just to remind everybody. And, Mark and his guys do a great job and are able to keep up with the work now. But the caveat is if stuff really starts to explode and the amount of permits that you just heard is astronomical already. But if that was to go back up, then that's probably something we would be back here saying we need to put some resources back where we had cut them during COVID. So
So it's not in the funded budget?
it's not funded, no. But it hasn't been for the last couple of years.
Yeah, thank you.
There is a second red one there. What's
Yeah,
that, what's
it's
that
just zero.
indicate?
The one in red is just.
There's two in red. There's the unfunded one, and then there's another one.
Right, I'm down those two inspectors.
Okay, so those are unfilled positions, one of which you don't intend to fill immediately, but the other you do.
Yes.
Okay,
It's
great.
just vacant.
Makes sense. One other question while we're on that sheet. The admin assistant went from step 6.9 to 6.3. Is that because it's a different person, or? Okay, that makes sense.
Move to approve?
Thank you.
Second?
Thank you. This is to approve the building inspector budget of $737,940. Chris Campbell.
Yes.
Doug.
Yes.
Chris Delaney.
Yes.
Frank.
Yes.
Steve.
Yeah.
Megan.
Yes.
Rob.
Yes.
Ed.
Yes.
Roger.
Yes.
Chair votes yes. That's 10-0-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, our next budget is the MIS budget.
You guys start talking about numbers, I'll be back too.
Excellent. Which is account 155. We have Jose D'Souza and Joe Bergiano with us.
Thank you.
Welcome. Do we have a report, Megan?
Yes, we do. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you? Brad and I met with Jose and Joe to discuss the FY25 budget for the MIS department. There is a small increase in full-time salaries, which is a step increase for a single member of staff. There is a small increase in salaries because of steps in general. Note that the part-time position is still open. There are increases in several of the network and web service subscriptions, and there is a $10,800 line item for the WebEx license fee that was paid for by ARPA funds last year, but only half that amount will be covered this year. It's our understanding that ARPA funds will be used, no ARPA funds will be used in next year's budget to cover this expense, and that it's anticipated that the MIS department will absorb these costs into their budget next year. And also support for Munis increased by $7,313. The subcommittee voted 2-0 to support the request for an $818,447 budget, which is an increase of $30,365, or 3.85%.
Great, thank you, Megan. Jose or Joe, would you like to add to that?
No, I don't have anything more to add.
Me neither. Only one thing, I think that we made a mistake of 1 cent for her checking.
Can't be too careful.
Rounding.
All right, we'll let that slide. Do we have any questions for MIS? Frank?
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I just want to double check something. It ties back to the treasurer's budget, I believe. The munis support you list here, is that how we do the contracted services?
No, so the munis that we have there is our annual maintenance and support and licensing that we pay every year. The piece in the treasurer's budget, which we'll get to next when Gary gets here, was just for something we didn't need to add on extra to prepare for the billing that they used to do in the,
But I think we did get some MIS support for that.
oh, there's plenty of MIS support, but it's,
Right, so I just want to do a shout out here on this. This department covers a lot of ground. It hasn't been in place, for decades. We've kind of built this thing up more recently, and I think the payoff is really substantial. So I'm glad that we spend this money on the department and on the staff. They're doing great jobs. Thank you.
Thank you.
And this is the last year for ARPA going anywhere, is that right?
correct, yeah, ARPA expires on 12/31/24. So everybody's sort of, anything that was offsetting their budget, which is only a couple of budgets, is absorbing half of that this year. And then if it's going to stay, which for them is WebEx, that's not going anywhere. That extra $5,000 will be absorbed in their budget next year.
Okay, so we're weaning all the budgets off of that. Okay. Do we have questions regarding MIS budget? Rob?
Hi, guys.
Okay.
Are there any plans that have somebody take a CIO position,
Not at this time.
oversee it?
So what we do now, specifically towards cyber, some resources and mostly man hours and time was changed in last year's budget when we added some additional resources in the part-time, and was to take some time out of Joe and Jose's schedule, and we upgraded one of the positions below them to be more in the critical infrastructure, to do more of that, so that these guys could spend some of their time with that. Directed specifically on security. We're in the process of finishing our year-long
Assessment.
our year-long assessment of our cybersecurity and getting cybersecurity response plans in place. And assuming we're hoping to move forward with doing some of that and see if there's a recommendation that comes out of that. But right now, there isn't, we don't see that.
Do other towns have CIOs?
None that I know of, but we can get that data.
That would be good. I see it as a lacking, but that doesn't mean that I'm right. Thank you.
Okay. Anything further?
Motion to approve?
Second?
Thank you.
Are we hogging this?
This is to approve the MIS budget of $818,447. Chris Campbell?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Chris Delaney?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
Steve? Megan?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Chair votes yes, that's 10-0-0. Also under MIS, we have the capital improvements accommodated account 903, which is under other accounts. Megan?
So this is the last year of a 5-year plan consisting of a $1,477,533 expense to improve network hardware across the town and a $517,571 expense towards improving network security. The work on hardware was completed 3 years ago, and the network security improvements are ongoing. The town is billed $400,000 per year as part of a 5-year zero-interest loan from the provider. Negotiations are now underway for the next 5-year plan to address network hardware and network security. The subcommittee voted 2-0 in support.
Great. Would you guys like to add to that?
I'll just add one thing, that we'll be back in January to look for town meeting to approve another 5 years, because anything over 3 years needs to go to town meeting to approve, and we expect the number will probably be higher than it's traditionally been, now that we've added a cyber security piece to it, and our network has grown, and stuff gets more expensive, so.
Sorry. No, I was going to say, in the 0% is not going to come as easy as it has the last 2 rounds. So we're talking to the vendors now and saying, based on the size, that maybe we can get to 0%. But if you look around at other places, the best we're getting is like 1.99 or 2%. So, but we're hoping to try to keep that at 0 if we can.
Okay. With the next plan coming out in January, would that be for the following fiscal year then that it would start? Okay, so that won't.
It would probably be finalized for May when we ask for the money. In January, we would just ask for the approval to go 5 years, or maybe we would have the plan done.
Okay, so it won't show up in the budget until FY26?
Correct.
Okay, great. Do we have questions on capital? Roger?
So if we can't get a 0% loan, why don't we fund it a year at a time and not have to pay any interest ever?
Well, I don't know that it would work out perfectly for a year at a time, dollar-wise, but I mean, I guess free cash would be an option to do it if we didn't get 0%, but I guess I'm guessing with the size of it, and after pitting vendors against each other, we'll be pretty close to 0. And then you can roll out the plan however you want and have the flexibility to move stuff up and back because you have the whole thing approved. If we were to go to town meeting saying get 500,000 approved a year for 4 years, we'd be limited on only being able to do 500,000 worth of work, and we would lose any economies or efficiencies of doing bigger projects at once. But it's something we would look at.
Yeah, I think I get it. It seems like, making a 5-year commitment to something and essentially committing that money up all at once seems atypical to the way that we usually do things, except stuff that's bonded, that has a longer life cycle than computer infrastructure, which has a pretty short lifetime.
Right, and I think that's why we do it, because the unique life cycle of it being 5 years.
Right.
All right, thanks.
Did you have something, Frank? Or?
No, I think that this is a fairly complex subject, actually. It depends on the scope of the project, the life of the hardware, who the bidders are, that sort of thing. And they do need to figure that out. It's a really good point to make, but I wonder if some of these projects come in like phases of you do this, you do this, you do this, and you want to get one prime contractor for the whole thing. You may need to let a multi-year contract, but it's an interesting question. I just don't know what the projects are likely to be and what the contracted services are going to look like, and we don't need to do that now.
Correct.
We need a chance to think about that and bring it to us.
I'd expect them to be pretty much the same, rolling replacement of all of the infrastructure and upgrading software, but
That's all basically, that's what it is. Plus licensing.
Anything new and
just because it ages out.
maintenance, licensing.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Anything further? Nope. Motion to.
Second.
Thank you. This is to approve the capital improvements accommodated account 903 of $400,000. Chris Campbell.
Yes.
Doug.
Yes.
Chris Delaney.
Yes.
Frank.
Yes.
Steve.
Yeah.
Megan.
Yes.
Rob.
Yes.
Ed.
Yes.
Roger.
Yes.
Chair votes yes. That's 10-0-0. Thank you very much, Jose and Joe. Take care. All right. Next, we have the treasurer collector account 145 And we have Gary Giannino, treasurer collector, with us. And I should remember your name, but I forgot. I'm sorry. Could you introduce yourself?
Good evening to the members of the board. I'd like to introduce Anna DeRosa. She is the deputy treasurer collector.
Very good. Thank you. Do we have a report, Frank?
Yes, we do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is Department 145, and the report's still online. And some notes I'll make about it. All the positions in the department are actually filled. There's no change in the head count. And as Gary's just, indicated here, we've moved from an assistant collector to a deputy treasurer collector. Anna is in that position, and that also gives us some depth on the bench and some level of succession planning, which we think is a good thing. I'd also mention that probably over the next 3 years, there may be some retirements in Gary's department, and, that may turn out to be something that we can introduce some efficiencies. We just don't know yet, but there will be some additional changes. It's a reduction of 35% to the contracted services in the munis tax bill conversion, which is what I was referring to. But they simply didn't need the contracted services to do it, and so $2,750 just went away. That's what happened there. Otherwise, there's really nothing else that's changed. And the subcommittee voted 2-0 in favor.
Okay. Would you guys like to add to that?
I think Frank summed it up
Okay.
eloquently. I can tell you we had no ARPA funds, so there's nothing that has to be absorbed into our budget. But we've continued to make improvements in how we provide our services. Our online collection has increased dramatically, which is a good sign. We continue to promote that. Our lockbox services, I think people have gotten to the use of the addresses in Woburn, and they're doing a good job, so we're seeing less people at the window. Our motor vehicle excise tax continues to be the lowest tax we collect, but the most troublesome and most problematic, and that's because we get our information from the Registry of Motor Vehicles, and people are always in leases, giving up leases or moving, and so it creates the most consternation among our taxpayers. But we're working through that. It's been a year of change, as Frank mentioned, but I think it's been, some streamlining has been created, and we'll continue to do that as we move forward. So, from the time I've got here to now, we're down 1 head count, and I could see that, as he mentioned, with retirements, some continuation of a decrease.
Thank you. Do we have questions? Frank?
I would mention on the excise tax collections, but it's about a $4 million value, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so the problem they've got is there's a lot of money to collect there, but it's kind of pretty hard to do the inflow accounting and where the hell it's coming from. So it's worth doing. If we can make it more efficient, great, but we need to do it.
It's as I said, the Registry of Motor Vehicles is where we get the file. It's not personal property and real estate tax. We control the file. Anna and Paul process it, and we can verify it. And we have the assessors go through the same problem. So you get a lot of, I'm not saying a lot, you get more people that are upset that they're even getting a bill, especially if they've moved out of town. And yet they have to go in and they have to come in, talk to the assessors, prove that they no longer have their car. There's an abatement process. It's just, people in my office really fear the, so, and the deadline was Friday, and we closed at 1 o'clock on Friday, but there was something going on at 2 o'clock, so I happened to stay and talk to some people around 1:30, 1:45, which is fun. But we took their money. Never turned the money away.
Won't make that mistake again. Yeah. All right. Anything additional? Chris?
couple of questions on the expenses part.
Yes.
So maybe this is just needing to know contracts better, but for example, 3 days of meals times 3, so that's like $56 per meal. Is that something that's in a contract there?
We have, this is when people go to their training out in Amherst.
Yep.
There's some training in the Cape. In June, there's training and testing for certification in September. So it's really, and there's some courses you can take along the year through the Middlesex County, the Mass Treasurers Collectors Association. So it's more of a safety. We don't use that whole 500 every year. This year, we'll be sending Anna, Paul, and Andrea to Amherst, so it could get a little higher than it has been in the past.
I mean, that's just, I guess, a general administration question is
27 meals, 3
27.
days times 3.
3 days of meals times 3.
Right.
Times 3 people.
Three people, 3 days, 3 meals a day for 3 people is
That
9.
makes much better. Okay. Then the flip side is on the travel, I think that's under by $135, 250 times 0.58 times 3.
Yes, that was brought up to me by Frank. That was I'm sorry, that's my fault. I said about $300. The truth of the matter is, I don't charge for mileage when I'm going somewhere. Anna doesn't. It's more when people are going to the bank, some of the associates. So I should have updated that. In fact, as Frank picked it up pretty
My
quickly.
concern is it was under budget.
Yes.
They seem to be able to live with it, so we left it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the last one, the hotel stay would be like $133 per night. Is that, I mean, that's great if you can find that.
Yes, we have, the Amherst there are some accommodations right on campus.
Great.
And then Holiday Inn.
It's fun. All right, thank you.
There is not, and I can tell you, we don't overspend on that. You can see there was the EMTA annual dues. I took that off a couple of years ago. I didn't think that was worth the, going to their conferences, so.
All right, anything additional?
Motion to approve?
Second?
Thank you. This is for the treasurer collector budget of $785,663. Chris Campbell.
Yes.
Doug.
Yes.
Chris Delaney.
Yes.
Frank.
Yes?
Steve. Megan.
Yes.
Rob.
Yes.
Ed.
Yes.
Roger.
Yes.
Chair votes yes, that's 10-0-0. Now, for a somewhat bigger one, we have the Middlesex Retirement Accommodated Account, which is account 901. It's under other accounts.
It's in the very, very back end. It's in the very end, I think, of the whole thing. So this is our whole retirement system for non-teaching positions, okay? So it's everything but that. We've been in the Middlesex Retirement Program for quite some time. There's an actuarial study that they do, similar to what you see for OPEB. I believe you got in a mail distribution some of the key pages from the last actuarial assessment that was completed. The data was relevant to January 1st of 2022, so it's fairly current. A couple of highlights of that I'd like to mention. The cost, the 14 million plus, is our prorated allocation out of what our employees draw and will draw going forward. The employer, to support this program, contributes 5.04%, which goes into the payroll. That's our contribution to this thing. And I think a lot of people, I know when I see these numbers, I say, oh my God, that's a lot of money. It actually, compared to most pension systems that do matches and other things, it's actually at 5.04%. It's actually quite efficient. And it's a benefit for our employees, obviously, in the town, I think does well with it. Currently, the actuarial study, shouldn't say study, it's the best forecast you can make based on all the data you've got, death rates, hiring, retiring, the performance of the PRIT fund, which is the primary investment vehicle for this, the discount rate that it's modeled against. And currently, this is showing us to have a 2037, no, I'm sorry,
2036.
2036, our unfunded liability could potentially be retired. Now, as Mr. Sagarino will point out, in his entire career in municipalities, he's never seen one of these programs actually retire. They just get a little longer, so who knows, but it's actually doing quite well. At the point that the unfunded liability is addressed through the trust fund and therefore retired, you're then left with contributing what's called the normal cost. This is just like OPEB. That's the money you gotta put in every year for everybody that's coming along who in the future is going to retire and draw money. So I put $1 in today, they retire in 20 years, the dollar's now worth $6, that funds their retirement in theory. That normal cost would bring this program down in the $2 million range versus the $14 million you're looking at here. So someday we hope that we could get some relief on this cost. If it happens, great. It'll be, a great tailwind for lots of things. If it doesn't, it'll continue to be a program similar to this, where we have to pay into the unfunded liability. We voted 2-0-0 in favor of it. There's a lot of data in this stuff. If you're an actuarial type or an accounting type or whatever, the information's here. I couldn't possibly present all of this. Gary probably will want to say a bit more. And Gary's on the board for this as well. So that's a great asset to us.
And did you have a vote on that?
2-0-0.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Gary, did you want to add to that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As Frank mentioned, I'm on the advisory board, so I have 4 meetings. Well, I actually have 8 meetings a year because it's a subcommittee on investments. The 99.5% of the funds are invested in PRIT, which is the Pension Reserve Fund, which is overseen by the state. The 5-year return for PRIT is about 8.4%. The last year, unfortunately, for 2022, we had about an 11% loss. 2023 had about 11% gain. So over the 10-year, it's been 7.4. The discount rate for this system is 7.15. So the PRIT has been a little over that. PRIT itself tries to measure out to 7% on the discount rate. I don't think there's any question as to the value of having our funds there managed by a professional group that is quite diversified in many areas. Middlesex County overall has a funding ratio of this liability of about 60% on a market value and about a 54% on the actuarial tables, which are more conservative. In the market, I'd go with the actuarial versus the market because we don't know what the market's going to do. Overall, the Middlesex County retirement system has, when comparing it to other systems over greater than 500 million, is right there in the middle as far, or the higher echelon as far as return to expense ratio. 52.52% for expenses compared to, say, a Mass Teachers was at 53. The City of Boston, which has 63.63, Mass Teachers 0.52, Plymouth County 0.73, Norfolk County 0.68, Worcester County 0.58, Worcester Regional is at 5.2, Bristol County, I don't know how they do this, at 0.92, it's almost 1%. Somebody should check into that, but that's not mine. So I think that they control themselves well. This is a reduction of 1 basis point from the previous year. The team at Middlesex County, I think, does a fine job. Again, they're moving into the more into the technology world themselves. They provide some good self-service for the employees. And the employees contribute 11% of their salary into this pension plan. Some people say, well, they're getting a pension. Most of us are in the private sector have put in 6.5 for Social Security, 1.45 for Medicare. Here, the employees put 11% in for a pension and 1.45% for Medicare. So this is an annual amount required to be deposited. We take advantage of paying it over at July 1st, versus we could pay half on July 1st and half on December 1st. The discount weighs in. I've determined if we took that half of the, say, $7 million we put in the bank and earned 5%, the discount is still worth putting in what we'd earned. So we'd request that the Ways and Means Committee approve this amount.
Great. Do we have questions on Middlesex retirement? Rob?
Who manages the money?
PRIT, the Pension Reserve Investment Trust.
The investment money?
It's a,
Which is the same thing that we used for OPEB.
we use it for OPEB, yes. It's run by, it's overseen by the state. It is a well-run organization. I've gone to, I get on some of their quarterly calls. They come in once a year they have over $100 billion in the investment trust. They're broken up. They're broken up through numerous diversity in their investment accounts, and they're overseen by the state treasurer.
Okay, thank you.
Anything additional?
Move to approve?
Second.
Thank you. All right, this is for the Middlesex Retirement Accommodated Account 901, which is in the amount of $14,291,966. Chris Campbell.
Yes.
Doug.
Yes.
Chris Delaney.
Yes.
Frank.
Yes.
Steve.
Yes.
Megan.
Yes.
Rob.
Yes.
Ed.
Yes.
Roger.
Yes.
Chair votes yes, that's 10-0-0. Thank you very much, Gary. All right, moving on to debt, which is accommodated account 710. This one only appears on the scorecard and in an email that I forwarded from David. Frank.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is our debt service budget, principal and interest for existing debt and proposed debt for FY25. I apologize, you've got an email memo on this. I didn't do a handout for this whole thing, but it's not too bad to look at. So a couple of comments that I want to make. Well, first of all, the principal, we didn't break it up. We have to vote separately, Mr. Chairman, on principal and interest, apparently.
We do?
I think we have historically.
I think we have, sometimes we have, sometimes we haven't, but our plan is to, in the budget book, have it be one.
It's one line item, so I think we can vote it as one item.
All right, so you got it right. It's $8,772,664. It's a 7.13% increase in as far existing and proposed debt. Just for those of you that are curious, the principal out of this is around $6 million, and the interest is a little over $2.5 million. And the reason that is, just for the records, is because a lot of the historical debt has really good interest rates. Going forward, this is probably not going to be quite so rosy, but we'll get there one of these days. So one thing I did want to say is that on the existing debt, this is just a kind of a subcommittee comment. There really is no plan to do any refinancing of existing debt because there's no benefit to it. Historically, whenever we've seen the rates jerk around. If we can catch a lower rate, some of these bonds are worth it to actually close down and reissue and get a lower rate. And we've done that. There's probably nothing in the cards for that at this point. And another comment here is that we haven't considered leveraging any of this down from a budget point of view with free cash. The way you could leverage it down is obviously to retire some of the debt, and therefore the interest goes away for whatever you retire, or, you know, play with bands, that sort of thing. We haven't gotten to that yet, and I really have no clue, you know, what that'll do to this at this point.
Presumably that'll be more interesting with new projects that would have higher rates.
Absolutely, that's absolutely, and as far as and this, you model based on a 5% new debt, am I correct?
Correct.
Correct. And so two things are going on here that are all, who knows, but they look favorable. It is conceivable that we could capture something better than 5% on the new debt. And there are indications, there are real indications that that's in the works. Not a ton, but it certainly doesn't seem to be going up. If anything, it's going down. And the second thing is we haven't applied any free cash. We voted 2-0-0. And if you could look at the proposed new projects that are on here, which we're certainly looking to do, there's all kinds of stuff for the water system, the MWRA Phase 2, the water system replacement, which is really the media materials in the mill pond system. And I'm not sure that all of that comes due in this fiscal year, but that's how you budget it. I'm not sure that the actual cost of this 1 year will be all that.
Right. So, if I may, Mr. Chairman? So the report you have in front of you is, again, just the snapshot of next year only. It does include the end dates for the existing debt. And like Frank said, we spend a lot of time on calls with our financial advisors who do an outstanding job and do pretty much the entire state. So we spend a lot of time seeing if there's any opportunity at all to refinance any debt. So that's extensive. And then on the proposed debt, just one point about the free cash. This proposed debt is only, these projects are existing, the ones that are below. These are something these are projects that have been approved, and we have borrowing out for them, short-term borrowing out for them. Where the free cash is going to come into play, and does every year, is when we talk about the stuff that's on this year's warrant articles list, capital projects that we're proposing either to borrow for or use free cash to not even let them see the debt schedule. And then again, we'll do the same thing next year when if we do end up taking out bans for any of those projects, do we want to try to work some of that ban pay down into our debt service budget? So in this debt service budget, there is a pay down. If you could scroll all the way down to the second to last project there, you see the Fox Hill feasibility study, and the payment for next year is proposed to be $936,000. That would pay off that ban. So we would not end up long-term borrowing that. It would stay off the debt schedule. So if we were to expand this out to the 5-year look, the 10-year look, and so on, you would see there's no more payments for that. So that's something we're doing inside of the debt service budget. And the two projects that you see on there that have nothing for FY25 but are listed on there is because we have an existing ban payment due for those, but we're paying them with other resources. So the public safety project communications plan phase 2, we currently have a ban for $740,000 due in April. We're paying it out of the debt service budget that we had planned to do when we approved the budget last year, so that's not going to carry anything over to next year. The one below at the sewer pump station, Force Main, that was a $4 million ban coming due in April. We're using ARPA funds to fund that project, not using ARPA funds to pay down the ban, so that's not allowable. We're using them to fund that project. So that's been vetted through our auditing firm and through the ARPA regulations. But so now that $4 million ban doesn't roll forward. The top project, that's MWRA Phase 2, that's a $5.3 million project. We're only going to end up permanently borrowing $3.3 million for that, because that's the rest of the ARPA payment. So when we first had our meetings about ARPA and what we were going to do with that $8.5 million, And we said we were going to use, at the time, 6 million of it to pay for the PFAS problem that had just come upon us at the time. We ended up, it wasn't economical to do it for that because we got a 0% loan, and B, we got $3 million, over $3 million waived from the principal. So it was directed towards other water and sewer projects that we were working on at the time. So those are just some of the things to keep those off of next year. And when the real free cash conversation that we have a meeting scheduled with Town Hall 1 will be, what are we going to do with the $25 million worth of projects on this year's?
So if I may, Mr. Chairman, just so that I'm really clear, let's take a look at the Fox Hill feasibility study. So it's listed in the FY25 schedule at $936,000, but you're saying we could retire that whole thing?
That $936,000 will pay off that ban in total, and it won't carry forward.
Okay, but it has to be in the FY25.
That's why it's budgeted at that number, instead of just, $188,000 for just the interest.
These numbers reflect the plan, including retirements and that
Correct.
sort of thing, right? Okay.
Okay.
So our plan when we set the debt service budget is to talk about what options do we have, or opportunities do we have to not carry debt further or pay bits and pieces of it down and stay within our range of trying to keep the increase, 5 to 8% range, knowing that we have to get, to here, and we're here. We don't want to do, and then that, we want to kind of smooth it out. And
That's probably a good note. This is a 7.13% increase on principal and interest.
Thank you.
Chris?
So I'm just curious, Frank, what would be considered a favorable rate to what the rates are today? Just historically.
The lowest you can get.
I mean, I know we get some zeros, but
I'm not going to start predicting the bond market, but
like some of these are like, we're not even close to where the rates are, so they're like 2%. I'm just,
oh no, you kiss that goodbye.
What ends up happening for the town, because we have such a good bond rating, AAA, and that's with the stewardship of the town, the administration and committees like yourself, the coupon rate would be at 4.5, but our net interest rate is 2.5. We had, I think 2 years ago, we netted out something like 1.4 on some of our financing. So we get a premium, and then we pay that off. As John was talking about, we always look to refinance, and I mentioned it to David and Frank last year when we started in February. We were looking to refinance some of this, and we had about a $2.3 million savings. By the time we got to April and we were ready to bond it, that had disappeared because the rate jumped up so high. So when we talked to our advisors, they still thought the rate was at 4.5 that John had mentioned. So if it does decrease, who has the crystal ball? But we're hoping maybe the coupon rate would get to 4.25.
But the important part, I think, of that is stuff that's yet to hit us, right? We're hoping that there's a real chance that we'll do better than what these have been modeled out at. They've all been modeled at 5%. There's some hope that we will do better than that.
Yes.
And if they're going through a band first, that gives us a little time for rates to come down, hopefully.
Absolutely. Time could help us.
Do we have additional questions? I had one. What's a non-tax support item? What does that mean?
So it's something that's going to be paid with different resources. In this case, those projects are the sewer I&I projects because we pay them from the I&I funds. Those are the 0%. We get a 75% grant and 25. And then the other one is the Meadowbrook School boilers. That's paid through the rental fees from the Meadowbrook School, deposited into that revolving account, debt service paid out of that revolving account. And then one more is streetlights.
Okay, so it is stuff coming out of enterprise funds, revolving funds, that kind of thing?
Yeah, yeah, so it doesn't go on the list.
So it's not in the operating budget. Got it. Okay. Thank you. Do we have additional questions?
Motion to approve?
Second?
Thank you. This is to approve the debt budget accommodated account of $8,772,664. Chris Campbell.
Yes.
Doug.
Yes.
Chris Delaney.
Yes.
Frank.
Yes.
Steve.
Yes.
Megan.
Yes.
Rob.
Yes.
Ed.
Yes.
Roger.
Yes.
Chair votes yes, that's 10-0-0. All right, moving on to central administration, which is account 149. We'll do the operating budget part of that first, which is just a central machine, central supply part of that budget.
Okay. So just skip over all the accommodated.
Right, because we need to do those separately as a line item, I believe.
Okay, so central supply is central machine. And those came in at, so I have the numbers.
So that's the 169,210 total operating number, as I read it.
Right, and that's showing a 22.62% increase. Okay, so let's take these one by this, two of them. First of all, the central supply. Central supply, the problem here, it's not really a problem, but it has never been moved up with costs over quite a period of time. And so simple things like paper have jumped a lot in cost. So to reflect what this is really looking like for FY '25, we have upped the budget, I believe it's to $140,000. So the run rate, we're already at, for this fiscal year, we're already at 61,000. If you just double that, you got 122 in this fiscal year. Going out another fiscal year to give themselves some room, they budgeted at 140,000, and there's a breakdown of that. But the breakdown is quite reasonable. The interesting part of that is these sort of controllable small supplies, and it turns out to be a lot of money. That's really what it costs, and they run pretty tight lid on that. So we did approve in 200, and that's what it came out to be.
Okay. Would you like to add anything to that, John? Or?
No, if there's any questions, I do have Sam here to
Excellent.
answer. He's the one that put the...
Do we have any questions on central machine and supply?
Well, this is the supply line, right?
No, it's both. We're putting them together because that's what fits in operating budget.
Okay, so let me just make a few comments on central machine. If you look at that, they have quite a few pieces of equipment. For the most part, it's all printing and mail stamping. They have a mixture of lease and own. They've got a umbrella maintenance policy. These all have been worked on over the years. They keep cleaning it up. It looks pretty reasonable. And so the umbrella policy alone is $13,832. Then the consumables on top of that, and pots that you need, the people that don't lease them, you can tell them, $15,377. So that one's $29,000, and that gives you the total budget. They have the total operating of $169,210. We voted 200. A lot of pots in this, but it seemed to all make sense.
Okay. Do we have any questions on central machine? All right. I think we're ready for a vote here. If someone would like to make a motion. Thank you. All right. So this is the central administration account 149 operating budget of $169,210. Oops. All right. Chris Campbell.
Yes.
Doug.
Yes.
Chris Delaney.
Yes.
Frank.
Yes.
Steve.
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Chair votes yes, that's 10-0-0. All right, so moving on to the health insurance accommodated account. Frank?
Okay. So this is health insurance townwide. Basically, the design of the program is, they work on it every year, but the services provided and the providers that are available remain the same. They have a couple of notes that I made. One of them is that in the recent history, very recent history, the claims are a little bit elevated from what we've seen in the past, but nothing alarming. The stop loss insurance, we left at $125,000 per claim, and that's what you put in it. We're self-insured, so the last thing in the world we want to have is a couple of catastrophes that end up being very, very expensive. So you buy insurance to protect yourself. The cost of the insurance is obviously it's a little bit higher. You can lower your costs by taking more risk. In other words, you take more deductible. We elected not to do that. We will leave it at $125,000 per claim. And, you know, the best bids that we could get have been put in place. The premiums for the program, so for people that might be new, which maybe not anybody here, but people listening, we're self-insured. We set the premiums, we collect the premiums. The town is paying 70%, the current employees are paying 30%. That all goes into a bucket, a health insurance trust fund. We then have claims going on that we call claim services, and they come in, we audit them. You know, all of the ones that are actually bona fide have to be paid out, get paid out of the trust fund. Our trust fund has been very healthy. It's done well. That's employee money that's in there. And so Gary has set the premiums. And we've done this before. What we're trying to do is burn down the reserve in the trust fund a little bit. We don't need quite as much as is in there, and use it to lower the premiums in a given fiscal year. This fiscal year, there's about $500,000 of premiums that we will cover on our own from the trust fund, from money that we've already got. It's just there. And that helps get the rate down a little bit. The premiums are a little bit for the employees. One other note that I took that I think is interesting here, the retirees, so our split of health insurance is 70-30 today. Historically, I don't know what it ever was. It might have been 10-90 at one point. Then it went to 20-80 and then to 30-70. But those are all, the retirees that have those 10-90s and 20-80s are all grandfathered. That's their contribution. Those are slowly decaying because obviously people are leaving the program, mostly through deaths, and people are coming in, and the ones that are now more recently coming in are in the 70-30. Our current split in the retirees is at 22.5%. So we're actually a little better than an 80-20 split on average in the retirees. That's pretty good. So basically the whole program is eventually going to get to a 70-30 split, which we would like to see, obviously. Medicare will cover separately. So Gary, you've got a whole bunch of information on this. I don't know if you want to do some other top-level stuff or just take questions. It's really all I've got.
We offer, thank you, Frank, we offer 2 programs out of Blue Cross. Really, we offer one at this point, which is the HMO. There was a PPO that has 9 participants. Right now, we offer the HMO from Blue Cross, and we offer an HMO and a health savings account from Harvard Pilgrim Health. As Frank mentioned, we're self-insured. Our trust fund budget is presently sitting at $7.7 million. We have probably, if I was to say, operating cash flow in a given month as we pay our premiums and get the withholdings in, probably another $1 million to $1.5 million. That's in contrast to where we were, say, 4 years ago, we had over $10 to $11 million in that trust fund. Town meeting had asked us to reduce that, and so we've been actively doing it. This year, the members had a 4.5% increase to the premium, still below national average. The HSA, which is a high deductible plan, but allows members to contribute more than is being withheld. The town, it's to say a $3,000 deductible for individual, $6,000 for family. The town reimburses some of that and puts it into their HSA account. So we're slowly building that up, not as quick as we would like. The second page talks about how many members we have on that. But we're continuing to promote that. We've had 0 increase in premium in that over the last 2 years.
And all that money rolls over.
All that money rolls over with the employees. If the employee leaves the employment, they keep that money. And it's a good program. It works quite well for, say, as they've said in the past, a younger population and a healthier population, because you usually end up with less costs. So your HSA bank account increases, and that's managed by an outside company for us, Health Equity. We also have a diabetes program, which we promote and has a good response from the probably of the members on there, of members of the plan that have diabetes. We probably have a 25% active acceptance into the plan, which reduces their prescription costs and helps people stay healthy. So we try to do that. We have a Canadian prescription plan we offer from people. In this budget, we also have a flex plan, flex spending. The difference between flex spending, some people think that that's more advantageous than a health savings account. The health savings account stays with you all the time. The flex spending is taken out of your account. If you don't spend the whole amount, you lose it. So, but it's still a good program. We have the health care, child care also in that. The program has continued well. As Frank mentioned, we had some higher claims in the last year. We had some, unfortunately, some high claimants, which you never like to see people have to go through that. But the result was a higher premium in our stop loss. But this budget did come in higher than Paul and John were hoping. But we think it's a realistic number for this next fiscal year. Represents a 5.65% increase from the prior year.
Okay. Do we have questions on health insurance?
Motion to approve?
Second?
Thank you. All right, this is for the health insurance account in the amount of $17,165,850. Chris Campbell.
Yes.
Doug.
Yes.
Chris Delaney.
Yes.
Frank.
Yes.
Steve.
Yes.
Megan.
Yes.
Rob.
Yes.
Ed.
Yes.
Roger.
Yes.
Chair votes yes. That's 10-0-0. Next is the OPEB accommodated account. Frank?
Just a question here, so the Medicare will be run separately?
I'm sorry, what's that?
Medicare?
Medicare is in the,
Voted separately.
Yeah, that's,
but it's not under health insurance.
yeah, that's,
Separate line item.
That's in the last budget, 900 or something?
that's rolled into, well,
149.
It's in 149.
yeah, it's in there.
It's an operating budget.
It's after health insurance.
It's the last one. You can, it's the last thing under
It's
it.
not going on.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Both the employer, which is the town, pays 1.45%.
Right. I've got the data on it. I'm just trying to make sure we got the votes right. So that would get voted clear, the Medicare.
At the bottom, separate. It's the last, it's the last.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm screwing you up by doing it in a different order, is what Doug's pointing out here.
Screw the other.
What would you like to do next?
Anyone you want. You want to take OPEB?
Let's do
Let's do
OPEB,
it.
since I said it.
Near and dear to my heart.
Paul, Frank, Mary.
I know it's popular.
You might want to come up.
So I would like us to fund OPEB with $30 million of free cash. Anybody interested?
Not going to happen, Frank.
Half that.
Okay, OPEB.
Approve donating $30 million.
Steve, go back to sleep.
Okay, will do.
Other post-employment benefit is, it's fundamentally the backlog, this account, of healthcare insurance, all right? And so we have an unfunded liability as a result of that. We did an actuarial report on it very recently, and the program is just really trucking along. I think we're like the 5th year of funding it out of the operating budget, something like that, at a 9.3% increase every year. That amount of money, which you'll see on here, is programmed to retire the unfunded liability over a period of time. The liability is currently 13.4% funded. The discount rate that we're modeling it at is at 7%. Some years we do a little bit worse. Most recently we had a really crummy year, but other years it's very good. On average, we're beating the discount rate. The model's doing well. Currently, we're scheduled to retire this thing in 2048. To Mr. Sagarino's point, as long as he's been alive in community administrations, he's never seen one retire, but we're working on it. We're getting there. It's a $1,113,144. It's 19.3% increase by edict of a plan. We're making this happen. It's a bill that we voluntarily pay to burn down the unfunded liability. The report's available if somebody wants to study it. Good luck. And the subcommittee voted 2-0-0 to continue the program as is.
When are we expecting the next 2-year report?
2 years, I think.
The actuarial report is December 31st, 2024. Last one was,
So end of this year is...
That's when it will start. It will be based on that date, but it'll be,
But it'll take them 8 months to do.
There's a lag, right, okay. Would you like to add to that, Gary?
I can tell you the current balance of the investment account at this point is $16,999,000, so close to $17 million. That money, as Frank mentioned before, is with PRIM also. And our discount rate is 7%. We lowered that 2 years ago. Paul, John, and I discussed that. PERAC, which is the state overseer of pension plans, is now thinking 7% is a good number. They were starting to lower it even further down to 6.75. So we think this is a conservative number, as it should be. So. And as Frank mentioned, each year that number will go up.
Okay. Do we have questions on OPEB?
Move to approve?
Second.
Thank you. All right, this is to approve the OPEB budget of $1,113,144. Chris Campbell.
Yes.
Doug.
Yes.
Chris Delaney.
Yes.
Frank.
Yes.
Steve.
Yes.
Megan.
Yes.
Rob.
Yes.
Ed.
yes.
Roger.
Yes.
Chair votes yes, that's 10-0-0. All right, next is the unemployment accommodated account. Frank?
Okay.
Is that just you, or is it
Unemployment compensation. All right, so again, we go to 2-0-0 in favor of this, it's level funded. This really depends on what happens in the workforce. The school department is probably the biggest driver of this because teachers that are not tenured tend to move around, and so you end up with some unemployment claims there. We find it beneficial to do our own unemployment rather than the state program. We save money that way. We level funded it, and although historically it hasn't been the past few years, primarily because of COVID, because people really weren't moving around, it was really over budgeted. This seems to be a better number going forward for where we're at. So that's really a best guess based on expectations. It's a favorable program because there seems to be no way if we were to contribute to the state's unemployment financing that we would ever come out ahead. it's just more expensive for our cohort. So it's, as it occurs, we pay the unemployment.
All right. Should mention we have Sam Hockenberry with us, who's pining away for questions on this. He's not going to get any. All right.
You may want to say something.
Oh, I'm sorry. Would you like to add to that, Sam?
No.
Well said. All right.
Move to approve?
Second.
Thank you. All right. This is to approve the unemployment budget of $100,000. Chris Campbell.
Yes.
Doug.
Yes.
Chris Delaney.
Yes.
Frank.
Yes.
Steve.
Yes.
Megan.
Yes.
Rob.
Yes.
Ed.
Yes.
Roger.
Yes.
Chair votes yes. That's 10-0-0. Sam said just the right amount. All right, so,
Point out,
yes.
Paul's smiling like a proud father over there.
Note that for the record. Next is town insurance accommodated account. Frank?
So that's town insurance, property and casualty. That's townwide. We flood it, we break it, we burn it. We have insurance. It's $1,005,000, 9.95 increase, 200. We put it out for bid every year. It's not the, I would say it's not the most competitive market in the world to bid into, and casualty rates have gone up. Burlington is working its way off of a little bit of a flood maybe 4 years ago, and so our risk assessment is declining, but the rates have been going up. So that's why you see the kind of increase we've got, despite the fact that we're actually a better client and we can competitively go up to the market. It's something you absolutely have to do. We have, I don't know how many millions of dollars worth of property. It's got to be approaching $1 billion, I don't think. I don't even know, but it's a lot. This is our casualty coverage, 200.
Anything to add to that?
I mean, I guess it depends on what questions you might have.
Okay. Do we have any questions on that? Rob?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Where is our workman's comp? Is that part of this insurance?
Yeah, so workman's comp, the third-party administrator, the benefits, medical costs, and the premium are all covered under this line item in total. They're separate lines in Munis, but we roll it all up into the one number. We worked on a workers' comp, so the admin is a steady amount that's contracted. It's only just under $13,000 a year, and they do all of the investigation work or other work to talk with doctors and stuff and keep us informed quarterly as to where different claims are at. And then the premium, we locked into a 2-year premium deal. So the rate for the premium will be the same next year. There is a adjustment after where they have us audit what the actual salary was during the period. So that'll be increased a little, we'll end up paying a little bit more, but we're locking down a separate rate, and we removed an excess coverage that, with talking with our insurance advisor, they felt wasn't necessary. So we did save like $10,000 in the premium coverage by getting rid of a policy.
Not for police and fire, though.
Not for police and fire, that's Chapter 911F.
All of them.
How many cases do we get a year?
It varies. Your frequent departments are recreation, DPW, school, just because they have so many people, odds are. And it's like 1-2 people in each of those departments over the course of the year. Some of the cases lag on for a long time, but we work with the people, offer either a settlement or a renegotiated set of work circumstances to bring them back in. But that's, case by case. But it's not a lot per year in workers' comp in terms of people.
Okay, thank you.
Anything additional?
Motion to approve?
Second?
Thank you. All right, this is for town insurance in the amount of $1,500,000. Chris Campbell.
Yes.
Doug.
Yes.
Chris Delaney.
Yes.
Frank.
Yes.
Steve.
Yes.
Megan.
Yes.
Rob.
Yes.
Ed.
Yes.
Roger.
Yes.
Chair votes yes, that's 10-0-0. Next is financial services. Frank?
Financial services, so the town obviously has an outside audit done every year, close the whole year out. We go out to the market and bid for this. The contractor service company that we had it with, I believe it's going to be the same basic company, but they've been bought out by Marcom, so they're a division of Marcom now that does municipal audits. The budget for the audit itself is probably more like $66,000. We've got a $70,000 line item here. We've been keeping for a number of years, except during COVID, we dropped it off. A little bit of extra money in this to do some internal audits with that auditor. I think we need to be audited the cafeteria or something, or some revolving accounts. So there's some work that I think John would anticipate looking to do in this coming FY25 fiscal year. So there's a small budget for that. And that's really what it is. This is going on to it.
Like that, anything?
Just to add on to what Frank said, we use the czar of Massachusetts Municipal Accounting, Jim Powers, who is principal at Powers and Sullivan, and Jim is going to be retiring soon. So his firm was swooped up by a big national firm that didn't have a municipal presence in Massachusetts till last year. They bought another big municipal firm called Melanson Heath. So we think we're going to be in great hands. We were worried with Jim saying he was going to retire. He's got a great team over there, but not a huge bench. Well, now he has the bench he needs. So we re-upped for 3 years with Powers and Sullivan. So we're happy about that. And then, keeping a few $1,000s in there to do any sort of, not just audit, but any sort of financial efficiency, anything we might, if there was a change in a department head where we might want to look at that department and how they handle things, we would have a few dollars to be able to do that. So.
Okay, great. Any questions on financial services? Chris?
So with the audit, it's the yearly audit, that's just the town budget, that's not the school budget, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
So the annual audit for the town, which is about $66,000, that includes an audit of the school department. It's the department of the town. The school has to do an end-of-year report audit on their own and some smaller reports on their own. But as far as our big annual comprehensive financial report, which is our audit, it includes the school.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Move to approve?
Second.
Thank you. All right, this is financial services budget of $70,000. Chris Campbell.
Yes.
Doug.
Yes.
Chris Delaney.
Yes.
Frank.
Yes.
Steve.
Yes.
Megan.
Yes.
Rob.
Yes.
Ed.
Yes.
Roger.
Yes.
Chair votes yes, that's 10-0-0. And now finally we'll do Medicare, the accommodated account. Frank.
Well, there's a garnish of 1.45% of salary, and we pay according to what that percentage works off of on the payroll. And it came to $1,470,000, a 5.81% increase, obviously driven by the size of the payroll, since the rate, I don't believe, is changed at all. And the subcommittee voted 2-0-0.
So everybody's required to pay it, the employee, and then the employer is required to match it. We may have one, someone that might be like Gary's age may not have to pay it. They may have started a long time ago. I think we may have one person that still is in that category, but that's it.
So really old people.
They're going to fall off the retirement plan pretty soon.
The brain trust.
I don't like the ring of that one. Any questions on Medicare?
Motion to approve?
Second?
This is for the Medicare budget of $1,470,000. Chris Campbell.
Yes.
Doug.
Yes.
Chris Delaney.
Yes.
Frank.
Yes.
Steve.
Yes.
Megan.
Yes.
Rob.
Yes.
Ed.
Yes.
Roger.
Yes.
Chair votes yes, that's 10-0-0. So it's not, so in a vaguely related thing, negotiated settlements, is that, do we have a date for that?
We don't have a date yet.
Okay, wait,
We'll get it in, though.
We'll take it up with free cash.
Yeah.
all right, well, make sure we get it on the schedule early enough that I can get it on the agenda. All right, very good. All right, Frank, does that cover all your items, I believe?
No,
No, what did I miss?
Ways and Means and town meeting report.
That's next week, I think. Hold
Yeah,
on.
we just did them in our subcommittee, and they're not on till
Oh, okay, we took it up. All right.
The Ways and Means Reserve?
overachieving.
Yeah, yeah, I didn't put that on the,
Next week.
hold on a second.
I don't think you have a catch-all.
Planning on being sick.
Yeah, I put,
It's okay, Mr. Chairman. Doesn't matter.
yeah, it's on the agenda for next week.
Okay.
So we have to kind of stick with that. I didn't put a miscellaneous agenda item. Anything else? All right, so we'll get that next week. All right, so I think that covers the budgets. So what I wanted to move on to is the debt update item. And for that, I have a presentation that I sent to you earlier that I'd like to give. So this is just talking about the projects, some background, when we might do various votes. And what I'll be looking for at the end of this is to have a vote, hopefully that will adopt this as a Ways and Means recommendation that we can then bring forward to both the building committee and the select board. So think about it with that in mind, and it will be the last two slides where we really get into the specific recommendations. So you should have this in your email. It's also projected up there with no doubt increasingly smaller font sizes to make it hard to read. All right, so let's get right into the next slide here. Just want to do a quick thing on projects. I'm not going to go through this, but if you look at projects from the last 13 years or so, the summary of this is they're all sort of in the $8 to $32 million range, and that's anywhere from the fire station, DPW building projects, PFAS filter, and so on. So that's the takeaway there. Let's go on to the next slide. If we look at the potential projects coming up, and we'll focus on the police station and the Fox Hill projects, you'll see that the total size of those is 45 and 100 million. So these projects are, at least 3 times the size of past projects, and that's largely due to rapidly increasing construction costs. So, not long ago, these were in the capital plan for significantly lower numbers, which was completely realistic because that's what things were coming in at, but all of a sudden things got vastly more expensive. So the point is, the reason we need to have this kind of discussion is that things that used to easily fit into the not easily, but would fit into the operating budget no longer slip right in. They become significant portions of our budget. So let's go to the next slide, and we'll get into some particulars here. On the police station, you'll see that the original building was the Union School back in 1898. The police moved in there roughly 40 years ago. There was an addition made with cement blocks, and so there's a lot of issues that were discussed when we approved the feasibility plan, but there's a lot of, not surprisingly, old systems. There's leaks which have led to mold. There's traffic flow issues through the building because it's not designed as a police station. Some walls are starting, the cement block walls starting to crack, so there's a fair number of issues there. And I think the police would have been happy to have this done a long time ago, but it was in line after the DPW buildings. And so now DPW buildings are done. This project has come up on the town side as a project. Back in September of 2022 is when town meeting approved the $150,000 feasibility study. And Mike Hardy is on the building committee with this and gave an update a couple weeks ago. They have some conceptual pictures of what it would look like, and as you know, the plan is for it to go where the current police station is, in addition to using up some of the current sculpture park. The plan is to expand this from 27 to now 35,000 square feet, so it's also getting a little larger. So that's the police project. If we go on to the next one, which is the Fox Hill project, this is a somewhat newer building than the police station, but still built in 1967. And this is starting to show signs of its age. It's got the modulars that were added are requiring repair or replacement. The layout is kind of funky, which leads to issues with supporting the whole educational program. So, we end up having some offices that used to be hallways. We have a lot of special service spaces that are tucked into corners and are inadequately sized for what they are. The art and music programs are, moving from rooms to being on a cart. And just in general, a lot of the systems are the original systems, so they're aging out. So there was a feasibility plan study that was approved by town meeting in January 2022, so a little over 2 years ago. And the Mass School Building Authority has a very prescribed process of exactly the order you do things in, and what needs to happen before the next gate is passed. And as a reward, they'll, if you properly follow the procedure and they like you, you'll get a significant amount of funding from them, and we'll talk to that in a moment. So the point is we've invested over 2 years in this whole process already. And there's a lot of options considered with 2 and 3 stories, whether it will be combined Fox Hill Pine Glen, where it will be sited. And where they've ended up is to expand from 64,000 to 91,000 square feet, so it's a noticeably larger building. The choice was made to have it be a Fox Hill only replacement, so this is focusing on what was considered to be the most important need, as opposed to including in Pine Glen, which it has some benefits, but was deemed to be not essential to replace Pine Glen right now. And as we mentioned, there's a significant amount of incentives that are going into this project. So it's nominally a $100 million project. MSBA will fund $33 million of that, assuming that we continue along properly and things are looking good. In addition, there's $5.5 million of energy incentives that are anticipated for this, although some are less confident of that happening. The obvious thing to be aware of is MSBA funding and these energy incentives are things that aren't guaranteed to be there in the future. So there's value to striking while the money's available. And then just as a big picture thing, we know that there's a Burlington High School feasibility study that was approved and is underway. There's a program manager and designer selected for that. And further down the pike, one can see where Pine Glen, which is actually 5 years older than Fox Hill, but doesn't have the same issues, is also likely to be something that we'll be looking to replace ultimately, or renovate, or whatever. So the point is, we want to avoid bunching up these projects any more than necessary. I think the school committee submitted many years in a row to get MSBA money for the high school. And because that wasn't happening and they saw the opportunity to get the money for Fox Hill, that's why there was a switch over there. But those many years of, in retrospect, shooting for the wrong thing, unfortunately, just caused us to delay projects by more than we would have liked. So if we go on the next slide, I'm going to do a very fast review of Proposition 2.5, just to make sure we're on the same page with terminology, and it will come into play with what we're talking about right after that. So Proposition 2.5 is a way of limiting the growth in property taxes without the citizens getting directly involved, is really the essence of it. And the goal is roughly to limit property levies from increasing more than 2.5% a year. And we'll have a little diagram that gives more details of that in a moment. But the bottom line is, or the thing to keep in mind is that inflation in particular is not in this equation. So if you have, say, 6% inflation one year, you're still only allowed to raise the levy by 2.5%. So you can see where if inflation is anything more than 2.5%, you're going to, assuming that your budget increases at the rate of inflation, which we're actually increasing at a higher rate, but if your budget is increasing faster than this 2.5%, you're ultimately going to run into an issue. So there's this concept of the levy limit, which is the maximum amount that the town can impose in taxes, residential and commercial. And any amount that you don't actually put in the levy is the excess or unused levy capacity. So it's really good to have excess levy capacity, because it means that if you have a year where you need to raise more money or spend more money, you can do that without having to go to the ballot box. So our excess levy is on the order of a little under 13 million, I believe, currently. So that's a good place to be. So let's look at this diagram, which gives the particulars here. So the key thing is you have this levy limit base, which is the previous year's levy limit. So again, everything is based on a levy limit, not on the actual levy. So for the next year, you get to add 2.5% to that automatically. And then additionally, you get to add in any new growth, meaning if you construct new buildings or significant improvements, that gets the equivalent taxes on that gets added into what you can apply to the levy. So the general idea is if you happen to double the number of buildings in your town, then it would be reasonable that your levy limit could also double. So that's sort of the concept of what new growth is doing for you. Now, in addition, there are Prop 2.5 overrides, where if the town, via a majority vote, agrees that we have a need to spend more money or raise more money to spend more money, the town can agree to do that, and that override amount gets added in permanently to the levy limit. So that amount will be on the levy limit this year, and then any Prop 2.5 amounts calculated for the next year include that in there. So that's one way to raise your levy limit. The other way that the town can have a higher levy is through a debt or capital outlay exclusion. So the difference here is an exclusion is just for the purposes of a specific debt item. So if we just picked a police station, for example, if the police station has a certain amount of debt service associated with it, the town could put it on the ballot, and if the town agrees to that, then for as long as there is debt service on that item, the levy limit is basically increased by that amount. As soon as it's paid off, that's wiped off, and the levy limit is just using the original calculation without that having been factored in. And I won't get into levy ceiling because that is not something that particularly is an issue for us and is not an issue for most towns. So some of the so going next slide, Prop 2.5 override, the particulars of this is a permanent increase to the levy limit as described. It needs to be put on the ballot by 2/3 of the select board, which would be 4 out of 5 in our case. And then a majority of town has to agree to it. This is something that a lot of communities have done. 301 out of 351 communities have had votes on this. The success rate has been about 41% on that. So there's, one must be very careful before going to a Prop 2.5 override because success is by no means guaranteed. And this is not something that Burlington has ever put on the ballot. So we have no history with this. Moving on to the next slide is the debt exclusion. As mentioned, this is something that's an increased levy limit just for the life of the bond. And it also needs to be put on the ballot by select board, 2/3. And town meeting has no role in the debt exclusion process. They do not have anything to do with going on the ballot. They don't have to agree to debt exclusion. The only thing town meeting is involved in is, as usual, they have to authorize the expenditure, and because it involves borrowing, it requires a 2/3 vote for these type of things. So the town has to pass this with a 50% majority for it to pass. And when this vote happens, the debt exclusion vote happens, can be before or after town meeting votes to authorize the expenditure. There's no required order on that. And in general, you can group projects together on a ballot, but MSB has specific rules where you can't do that for projects that it's funding. So the history is that this is a little more successful. Again, a huge number of communities do this. 313 out of 351 have had a debt exclusion vote on the ballot, and it has about a 90% pass rate historically. Now, unfortunately, Burlington has only done this twice and it failed both times. So locally, we don't have a good success rate, but we hope to change that. You'll see the actual votes there. The second one was actually very close to passing. So if we go to the next slide, so on the next slide we have a few budget scenarios that we've gone through. So the question is, so that Prop 2.5 is all a lot of background. So what does that mean? If we look at two different scenarios, and the question that we're going to ask here is, when does that excess levy capacity that we currently enjoy, will that always be there, or will it go away? What happens to that? If we look at what I'll call the average growth case, and what we'll see is that that new growth factor that we talked about, which gets added to the levy limit, ends up being one really important knob to the process. So if we take the average growth that we've had in the last 4 years of 1.94% and assume budget growth that's the average again for the last 4 years of 4.85%, then we'll see that if we did a debt exclusion for both the Fox Hill and police projects, that it would be over 12 years before our excess levy capacity would go away. So in other words, a long time. And it turns out even with no debt exclusions, it would be more than 12 years before the excess capacity went away. And so why is it interesting if the excess levy capacity goes away? And the quick answer is because if you have zero excess levy capacity and you need to raise your operating budget, so that you exceed your levy limit, all of a sudden you now need to have a proper 2.5 override vote on the ballot. And as we saw, that has a less than 50% success rate across the state. So that's something that we'd really like to avoid. We don't want to be in a position where we have the budget that we think, a great level services budget, but, it's going up enough that we're over the limit, and we can't say for sure whether we could spend that until we went to a townwide vote, which has a less than 50% chance of passing. So that's a pretty bad place to be. So in the average case, we don't really need to worry at all. But counting on average things is obviously kind of risky. So let's take a more conservative scenario, which is the right-hand column. And instead of, for the new growth, let's look over the, I think it's over the last 15 years or so. If you take the worst case or lowest 3-year average growth rate, it ends up being 1.62% instead of that 1.94 average for the entire time. And then let's round that down a little bit to 1.5%. So this is fairly conservative. We're saying in no 3-year period have we ever had growth this low. But let's assume that's the whole growth rate every year going forward, and have the same budget growth. In that case, if we have debt exclusions for both Fox Hill and police projects, it's 11 years before we run out of excess capacity and would need to have an override, all other things being equal. And if we have no debt exclusions for those, then it's 6 years. So the debt exclusion on these two projects ends up doubling the time to when you would run out of excess levy capacity and need to have an override. But the good news is, even without the exclusions, it's still 6 years before we would run out. So we have a good amount of runway that if for some reason that we didn't have debt exclusions, that we could adjust things accordingly. So the point is, it's with or without debt exclusions, we're not, the train isn't going off the tracks immediately by any means. So what do we get out of this? That the debt exclusions aren't required for these two projects, but they are a really good idea for a fiscally responsible way to leave some budget headroom, and it delays when we would have future potential overrides. And furthermore, based on the size of these projects, the Fox Hill project is, in terms of the town portion after incentives, is only about a third larger than the police station. Both these projects have been approved by town meeting for feasibility studies, so had some reasonable amount of support from town meeting that these projects could make sense. So therefore, I think the result of that is both projects should be handled the same way. There's no non-political reason for saying one should have a debt exclusion and one shouldn't. From a financial point of view, they should be handled the same way. So now let's get onto the recommendation page here. So this is, what does all this mean? What I think makes sense here is that we should move forward with both these projects, that they've both gone through their feasibility studies. They both determined that the appropriate approach for how to make a new building, and that a new building is in fact both better than renovation and the right thing to do and necessary, and that neither of these projects should be dependent upon the debt exclusion for doing them. So again, the debt exclusion is something that is a good idea to do, but we shouldn't make it a dependency to do these projects, because even without them, we've got that 6-year runway. So with that in mind, the town meeting bonding votes, which need to pass by 2/3, when the projects would be ready to go to town meeting would be the police station in May of this year and Fox Hill in September of this year. And I'll lay out a timeline in the next slide here. And then the debt exclusions for both of these projects, the April 2025 town election is what would make sense for a variety of reasons for when that should be done. So the first reason is it doesn't need to be done immediately. It doesn't need to be done before town meeting because while the debt exclusion is very desirable, it's not required to fund the projects. The project can fit in the budget without the exclusion. There's no good reason right now to make the projects dependent on that. Should note that the debt exclusion passing or failing has no effect on what tax increase would be required to fund a project. The debt exclusion is strictly a way of giving some headroom on the budget, but it doesn't affect what the actual levy would be. So, folks shouldn't be confused that if they vote against the debt exclusion, their taxes will go up. Because if we do the projects, the taxes, need to be there to pay for it. Selecting this date for a town election avoids picking dates that are, the state primary or the presidential election and, mixing together with those events. And the town election is sort of a natural time for group it with other town-specific decisions that are being made at the same time. So doing it in April makes a lot of sense. The other choice would be to have a special election, but that's a whole another election with its associated costs, and getting people to show up for yet another election is a challenge. So there's no rush to do a debt exclusion vote, and the town election is a natural time to do it. It makes a lot of sense. We talked about the free cash, which is roughly 30 million. It'll be a little less after we go through our capital warrant articles. But because we're currently in a high interest rate time, it makes a lot of sense to apply some amount of that 30 million to reduce the debt and tax burden. And I'm confident John and Paul will pick exactly the right moment to for what that would apply to. But the point is, we're talking about, in terms of those project sizes, we're talking about incurring roughly an extra $100 million in debt. So, not that we would apply the entire 30 million, of course, to those, but the point is we have free cash that's roughly a third of what that new bonding would be. So it could have a substantial impact on that. And then something that we should all understand is, okay, this argument works for these projects, but when we look at the next large project, which is likely to be the high school, this argument won't apply anymore. We'll have used up as much of that runway to running out of excess capacity as we'll want to. If we try throwing another project in there, all of a sudden we'll see excess levy capacity going to zero in just a year, and that's not a place we want to be. So we need to realize that our next large project, the debt exclusion goes from being a desirable thing to being an essential thing. So but that's the problem for next year. So if we move on to the final slide now, is the timeline that this all implies. If we look at the police station on the left side, we have the town meeting vote for bonding in May, and then the debt exclusion vote in April of next year. And then if we look at the right column, is Fox Hill. The recent history is at the end of February, the Mass School Building Authority has voted to proceed with the project, saying, okay, this still looks good, keep going. So that was an encouraging attaboy. And then in August, the MSBA board is scheduled to vote their final approval to the project. At that point, that means, okay, you can count on us, we're going to give you the money. So that also starts a clock where the town has 120 days, or basically 4 months, where they have to come up with the funding, or MSBA says, okay, the deal's off. So if we do the town meeting vote that's not contingent on a debt exclusion in September, that fits well within that window. So that's what the bonding vote would be there. And then again, in April of 2025, at the town election, we would have the debt exclusion vote for Fox Hill. Now, since the MSBA funding has already, since the project funding is already secured at the town meeting vote in theory, it's possible that we could decide to aggregate these two debt items into a single vote at that point, because the MSBA rules would no longer apply. So that becomes a strategic question as to whether we would want to do that or not, and we don't need to decide that now. So the last two slides, again, are what I would be interested in seeing if Ways and Means is in agreement that this is a good set of recommendations to promulgate it across to other boards or not. So this is a good time for everyone to discuss and ask questions on this. Anything? Chris?
I have no problem starting.
Yep.
So I have a couple concerns in general, and I think the tough part with what I want and what can happen is we're stuck with the MSBA timelines here. Because putting both of these votes on a town election where we get roughly 15% of the vote, 15 to 16%, versus a statewide or presidential, again, we're not going to be able to make the November 5th, I know that, but you have 89% of the town that shows up to vote for that. That is a large part that's going to be able to speak versus a town election that historically is lower. Sure, there's going to be get out the vote efforts and whatnot, but I think we should seriously weigh, knowing that yes, it would cost more money, but seriously weigh a special election for it, since it is going to be a special thing for the town. Because that creates a different sense, and then it doesn't get stuck in the politics of politicians running for re-election, and the sole focus can be a town conversation on these two things together. And I do like them being on the vote together. I think that's really important for the town to see, like, we're coming together, they're both there, so I'm all in favor, but I would be more in favor of us, and I think town election, and Amy can quote me later, is roughly 30 grand, somewhere around there. But I would be very concerned with this becoming political issues, where this is a whole separate issue that I would want separated for politicians. I think my second point that I'd just like to make, Mr. Chairman, is I would also prefer if both of these were voted together at town meeting. If we're going to vote for this as a town together, I would like town meeting to consider it together, because there's one or the other, or the space in between. If we're going to really focus on these debt exclusions as a town voting it together, I think also as a town meeting, we should vote for it together, much like the town will do. I think that the town meeting will have more focused attention. September tends to be a little later, but can really weigh these two, much like the town will have to weigh these two. So I think separating it doesn't necessarily have that opportunity to do it just as the town would do it.
Okay. Something that I didn't mention, I should just throw in a couple extra points here, and then I'll respond to those, is this presentation came out of Town Hall 1 organized talks with administration about this whole debt process. So I didn't want anyone to think that this is just some cockamamie idea I came up with on my own. It involved a whole group of people coming up with this idea. And I hopefully I'm not stepping on any toes in saying that. I think administration is in agreement that this is a rational approach. Or
Absolutely, John. I know I'll speak for myself. We're the we're the ones that are championing debt exclusion. I can tell you, we just feel it's our professional responsibility to notify the town that we think that excluding this debt is very important to the future of the budget process. We get accused of being conservative. We are very conservative, but, you know, we do worry about how the math works on that. You know, if you go back a little bit further, I think our excess capacity, you know, 17, 18 years ago was a couple $1 million at a couple points. You know, our free cash was at one time $286,000. So our economy really ebbs and flows with the regional economy here in town. We do have a lot of concerns about the commercial district. We're working hard to try to bring forward rezoning efforts to try to keep that area vibrant so that that new growth number that is so important to the calculation continues to outpace what we anticipate, which will just give us more time before we start bumping up against Proposition 2.5. But I feel as though the discussion that we had and the ideas that came out of that meeting, John's presentation is very clear and concise for some very difficult subject matter, so I do, you know, for Prop 2.5 presentation, I feel as though you did an outstanding job on that, explaining that as best as possible. And I do see this as a very reasonable path forward for the town. From our standpoint, we just felt as though we need to alert the town that a debt exclusion is preferable on here. We don't want to be house poor with our mortgages and not be able to buy groceries. Again, that's not something that is going to happen next year or the year after, but, you know, as you pointed out in your diagrams, it could happen 6 years down the road or longer. We've worked in communities where Prop 2.5 was the upward limiting factor, and I can tell you, it is not a good situation for the town to be in. It creates a lot of infighting over resources. Departments are no longer friends. They're fighting over the same funding. Services are cut every year, every single year in some of the communities. And, you know, I think that, you know, that's a situation we want to avoid in the future. But I know that you can satisfy myself, John. I'm not sure about Gary. He's a wild card. But, you know, I just feel as though that we need to put the town on notice that a debt exclusion for these projects is preferable. It doesn't have to, the projects can be funded now and still fit within the confines of Proposition 2.5, but we strongly urge at some point in the spring, whether it's a special election or a town election, that we present the voters with the opportunity to exclude this debt so that we don't end up in a situation where, you know, we're bumping up against Proposition 2.5. Again, a lot of moving pieces, a lot of things can happen over the next few years. You know, if the economy turns around and things go great around here, we probably don't have to worry quite as much. I do agree the high school project's a different animal that will most likely require a true debt exclusion at that point, where the project goes up or down based upon the ballot. But I do believe that this path forward that was discussed at our Town Hall 1 meeting, I do believe is a very realistic and viable, and I can support this because we are notifying the residents of the town that we do feel that the debt exclusion is the most appropriate way to do this to protect our budget in future years.
Thank you. If I could just respond to Chris.
Actually, I was going to suggest, Mr. Chairman, that you let other people comment before trying to rebut.
Fair enough. All right, yes. Who else would like to comment? Oh, sorry, Rob.
I saw the slide that said Prop 2.5 is based on property values. Now, I don't understand where our property values are going up 10, 12, 15% every year. That doesn't count?
So, no, is the quick answer. But
then why does it say property value?
So I'll explain that in a moment here. So there's two components here. So new growth is legitimate new things, like a new building is put up, you add a deck to your house, that kind of thing. And in particular, new growth is not your house got assessed $100,000 more than it was last year. So where property values come in if, Doug, if you go back to that slide with the graphic, there we go. So there's this concept of a levy ceiling. So in addition to the levy limit, there's something called a levy ceiling. The levy ceiling is, you can think of it as a harder limit, which is 2.5% of the total assessed property value. So in addition to, so you're not allowed to exceed the levy limit, but if you have an override, you can. But even with an override, you're not allowed to exceed the levy ceiling. So you can't ever, under Mass law, have your property taxes be more than 2.5% of the total assessed value across the town. So that's where your property assessment values would come in. Now, in practice, there's virtually no town that's above 2% in Massachusetts when I went through it. So that's, in practical terms, not a limit that towns are up against. But it is there. If a town went really crazy, they could get to that.
If I may, and correct me if I'm wrong, there are 2.5% at play, which is confusing. So it is your absolute ceiling, which you cannot levy above, is 2.5% is it full and fair assessed value. So that's a very smooth version of the value. It's not, what you see on Zillow. The assessor is a little more even keeled than the market is. And then the limit for next year, the levy limit is 2.5% over the baseline from last year. So it's based on the history of what you've levied historically. And that's what we want to move up with a debt override, or you can with a debt exclusion, and you can overall with an override. Because your spending has been increasing faster than that 2.5%.
Does that answer your question?
Yep.
We have.
That wasn't obvious.
Do we have additional on that? Megan?
Have we had a special election in the past, and what has the voter turnout been like for that? I see both sides of the argument, having a special election, having it be a single election issue, but also, saving money and keeping it on the town election in April.
I don't have any data on that. Do you know if we've had special elections?
We my memory serves me right, we did have one. I don't remember what it was for. Wasn't,
It was one.
it was probably about 9 years ago. I don't remember what it was for. If it's a town election, a town issue, you're going to get the same population from the stakeholders. And the stakeholders are the people that, in that case, it wasn't a tax issue. It was more of a program issue. I don't remember what it was.
Town Central or something.
It might have been the business district, the town overlay. Yes, Paul's right. It was on the town overlay. The town overlay passed, so that special election did pass. But you still get a similar population, be it 25% or the smallest I think we've had in the town election is around 12, and that was about 20 years ago. So it's been averaging higher than 15, but yes.
Yeah, John.
Thank you, John. One thing that might ease your concerns, Chris, a little bit is that the political pressure may be lessened because these projects would have already been approved. In theory, it already started. And now the real push is to whether just to exclude that debt and relieve some of the pressures we may feel 5, 6, whatever that number is down the road. So the project's are already approved and going. And now the real talk is, do we want to have the ability to be able to continue, or do we want to have potentially have handcuffs on? Because one of the parts of the calculation was the levy growth, which has averaged 4.85 over the last 4 years, I think it was. But with inflation's forcing pressures on personnel costs, even if we do have good growth, we could good new growth, that is, we could still have our levy growth outpacing that. And if we don't, we could have pressures on services, staffing, and salaries. We're gonna, the inflation hurts us in the negotiation room, and the pressures, personnel pressures are real. I mean, you see them, you just have to watch the news and see about municipal strikes, or not municipal strikes, school strikes.
Yeah.
I don't know, Mr. Chair, I don't know if you're going to respond to the election, or I'll be happy to do that, since,
Go ahead if you have a thought.
Chris, the idea behind a vote of the exclusion, which I do agree with, contrary to what Paul might have said, was that it gives the stakeholders the opportunity to vote. And the stakeholders are the people paying the real estate taxes. When you get to a state election or a federal election, you have people that you're going to get more people voting, but do they care about a local issue? So if the atmosphere out there is a negative one and you're talking about taxes, you're going to get more no's just for the sake of no versus how does it affect the town? And I'll use the case in point for the CPA vote, which was done on a state election. You had people voting, but they weren't stakeholders. It didn't affect them, but they said, we don't want a tax. We're just going to vote no. So in that discussion in our meeting, was it last week, 2 weeks ago? 2 weeks ago, there was there was a large discussion about that. And that's where it said, and that's where the conclusion was, these projects are needed. Town meeting has the authority to vote these with a 2/3 vote. We do think from a standpoint for future, it should be an exclusion. That, let's put that to the voters, let's put that to the people who are the stakeholders. So.
Doug, did you have something?
No, I'm good.
Right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I was obviously at the meeting where we spent a lot of time on this, and I'd say that this captures where we ended up, kind of the consensus position of a lot of puts and takes on should you do it, should they be grouped, what kind of an exclusion ballot should it be, we went through the whole thing. I have I think, Chris, I agree with Gary. I think the local stakeholder is going to come out with a vengeance in a local election. Whether it's a special or it's a program local election, they're going to vote because this is the kind of issue that gets the local people's attention, especially the ones that are the most concerned, far more concerned than who their state rep's going to be honest with you, in my opinion. So I agree with Gary on that. As far as bundling these are concerned, this topic has been getting more play than I thought it would very quickly around town. And I do not think that people are looking at it like, I'm going to do both of them or I'm not going to do either one of them. I think people are looking at it like, do I really need a new police station now? And is it worth $150 to me on my taxes? And is it worth $43 million? And I hear completely, honestly, a very different group of people that are asking about the school district, the age of the schools, and the merits of an overhaul at Fox Hill. And is it worth, with the reimbursement, $60-something million, do I want it or not? So I think we would be much better off taking the police station to town meeting for bonding when it's ready, and it will be ready in May. And I think when Fox Hill is ready, which is you'll get all the MSBA things checked off, you'll have the vote of the committee, everything's going to be fresh meat, fresh in people's mind, and then bring that one to the September town meeting, and it's a separate issue. I would not try to bundle. I wouldn't go out of my way to bundle these. In fact, it's unfortunate that they're as close together as they are, honestly, but MSBA really forced our hand. So I would keep them separate. I have no problem with it being a local election of some kind. In fact, I think it's much better. And there was a third point that you made. It escapes me at the moment, but I'll come back to it. But this is, and these numbers, I believe, reflect quite a bit of work. I know that John and people in his office have kind of played around with, and you probably have too, Paul, you know, where are we with excess capacity? What's going to happen with, you know, this level of volume, this level of volume? Where are the taxes going, and what's the average hit going to be? We did a back of the envelope look at a lot of this back when the Fox Hill Committee was, and Ed and Roger were first getting into what's this thing going to cost, and can we even afford it, and do we need an override? The back of the envelope, to me, made it look pretty close, that if you didn't need it, an override or exclusion at all to fund it, but it was going to be beneficial if we did. John, to his credit, independently went off and did this massive tool, which is a really great tool. You can do sensitivity analysis with it. And these numbers jive pretty well with what I think John Denizio came up with, and what I was kind of expecting. One surprise is the sensitivity that all of our finances have to new growth. New growth is the most sensitive parameter in this whole thing. And if you move that 1/10 of a point, it moves the years significantly. And if you were to move that up to the 194, if you were to move that average growth to 2%, it's almost shocking how healthy we get. So that's what this proved. I think this model is very good. I think the pros and cons that it's demonstrating have merit. And what it says is, if you want to do the projects, fund them. If you fund them, we can fit them both in the budget now. However, a year from now, we're going to be asking you to take the prudent action and give us the debt exclusion, if you so desire, publicly. It will not affect your cost. It will not affect your tax bill. What it could affect is the fiscal health of the community 5 or 10 years from now. Now's the time to make the choice. So I think this is a good plan, and I think it pretty much the way it is the way I would go.
We have other comments?
And I'll like to put a finer point on a couple of other points that have been brought up. So first, great presentation. I mean, I think it gives a really balanced view and frames what we're asking of town meeting, and then what we're asking of, and what we recommend to town meeting, and what we're asking of the town with a debt exclusion. And it's regrettable that for this discussion, the Town Hall 1 subcommittee was as popular, I think, as has ever been, and we are missing a few people tonight. So there are
3 people above our meetings.
there are only a few more extra people here tonight than there were for that discussion. But I think that we really did think very carefully about how to stage the questions, and I think that the right time to ask town meeting to take out the debt and fund the projects is when they are ready, when they are presented in full, because it's a lot to chew on, and town meeting is the group of people in town who've signed up to do that chewing and understand the projects. And the time to ask the town is during a town election. We've thought very carefully about that also, because like our town political elections, it really affects the functioning of our government, this budgeting process, and how we serve the people. And that's because what this exclusion really affects is the texture of our budgeting process. In 6 years of growth is slow, in 10 years of it's fast, because if we get to the point where we're up against our ceiling, our limit, then this budgeting process doesn't become an exercise where we all vote 10-0-0. It becomes Thunderdome because we're running out of money and we're deciding which departments to cut. And so that, I think, is of interest to the 16-18% of people who show up. Those are the people who vote in local elections who are thinking about not their tax bill tomorrow and the spending cash they'll have to go to the mall, as a result, they're thinking about paying their taxes over the next 25 years, that these bonds last, because they're the people who are here to stay. So there's a real convergence of interests. I think it's the right way to go.
I'll throw in a few ideas if everyone else has done. And by the way, thank you for that suggestion, Roger. Regarding delaying the town meeting vote on the police station, one additional risk is that by delaying it from May to September, you've inserted 4 more months into the police station schedule that didn't need to be there. And as we've seen, the only thing that happens with construction costs is they go up over time. So I think we lose momentum on the project, which would be bad, and we potentially incur extra costs. I think so for that reason, I would want to do it when it's ready. I think the other thing with, as Megan was, asking with special election, I think it's not entirely, whatever advertising or sales that we do to get people to go to a special election, we could presumably do for the town election. And, so I don't know that there's any particular reason to imagine the turnout would be higher. I mean, both are town-specific elections. If you don't care about a town election for town issues, I'm not sure how much more you care about a special election for town issues, but, that's obviously debatable. I do think, because what we're discussing here is specifically decoupling the debt exclusion from do we do the project, I think that's fundamental. I think if the debt exclusion, if the project was contingent on debt exclusion, there could be a stronger argument for having a special election, I think, because then you're truly voting, should we do these big projects or not? But that's not what the vote is. It's a vote strictly to give us space on the budget and the levy. And that's probably going to be the hardest part of the education campaign for this election is you're not voting whether we do this project or not. That's already decided at town meeting. You're voting on whether we have this excess levy capacity going away sooner or later. I think as exciting as my PowerPoints are here, I'm sure they're even more exciting in a townwide presentation. So I think that will be a challenge. But because we are decoupling them, I think that to me makes it make more sense not to have it be an election just for that. To put it in terms that John would appreciate, having a special election for an accounting issue, as it were, doesn't make sense to me. But I think I understand your point, though. I think with any election, we want to see a large turnout of motivated people that actually care. So certainly whatever we can do with that is good. Do we have additional points anyone would like to make? Or? Okay. If folks feel it's appropriate, I entertain a motion to have Ways and Means support the recommendations as a Ways and Means position here.
So moved. We'll second that.
Okay.
So just specifically, I mean, yes, it seems like the last couple of slides actually capture it. So in fact, the motion should essentially...
Yes, we're just to be...
Do you want the wording of the motion to be read, or are we accepting the lines, the recommendations on that slide? The timeline is separate, so it actually...
Yes, so what I think we're making a motion on is that basically the last 2 slides, which contain the specific recommendations and timeline, is something that we would like to be a Ways and Means position that we promulgate. Is that clarifying?
Yes.
Appropriately? Okay.
So
yeah, Frank.
One point I will make, the third from the bottom bullet on recommendations, utilize portion of $30 million free cash to reduce debt and tax burden. As a recommendation, I'm fine with it. Whether, how that happens and what we do, really, we don't quite know.
Yeah, I'm not sure that belongs.
You could even argue that doesn't belong as a recommendation, so much as a thing to keep in mind.
It's kind of what I was thinking.
It's an opportunity.
Administration feels about it. I wouldn't tie our hands with it.
I'm happy to move, in fact, I think it would be correct to move the understand point and the utilize free cash points to other things slide.
Except
Other
for the
stuff.
person who made the motion and the second to accept that change.
All right, yes. Can you make that motion?
So can we just clarify?
Sure.
It looks like the recommendations are the first 2 bullet points at the top. The sub-bullets after that are informational, and then...
Well, I think the first 3 bullet points, I think, right?
Okay, can we just highlight them?
Move forward on.
So moving forward with it not being dependent on debt exclusion.
Yes.
The bonding vote dates, and then the third one is the...
Scheduled debt exclusions.
Is the, where's the third one there?
Oh, it's
scheduled.
It's scheduled debt exclusion.
Yeah, you lost the carriage return, so it's scheduled.
Oh, okay.
So yes, those 3 recommendations. I move that.
Doug tricked me by modifying it.
No, I didn't. It just doesn't show well.
I understand.
So we'll be voting on the first 3 bullets.
If you want to see that, that's the.
And the timeline in the next slide is really just restating those same points. So the timeline is not actually a new recommendation.
Yeah, I think we just need the 3 bullets.
So why don't we vote on those 3 bullets? If someone can make a motion to amend whatever it was we were voting on to be that, that'd be great.
Actually, the original proposers can change.
Can we just make a new motion and forget
All right.
the first one?
I vote to, a motion to modify the current motion
Motion to recommend.
to amend, to cover the first 3 bullets on the recommendation slide, saying to move forward on both the police station and Fox Hill with neither dependent on the debt exclusion, to schedule town meeting bonding votes for town meetings on May and September, and to schedule debt exclusion votes for, I would say, a future town election, but this says April 2025.
Second.
Do we have any further discussion or clarification required there? All right, let's have a vote then. All right, Chris Campbell
No.
and Doug,
Yes.
Chris Delaney,
Yes.
Frank,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Megan,
Yes.
Rob,
Yes.
Ed,
Yes.
Roger.
Yes.
Chair votes yes. That's 910. Motion passes. Okay. Our final one will be a quick one, it's hopefully. Thank you very much, guys. I appreciate you staying late for us.
Thank you, guys.
The approval of the minutes. So Frank pointed out that we did not approve the March 6th minutes on March 6th meeting. It was the February 28th minute.
The time machine had broken.
I thought it was very insightful. So let's talk about the minutes amended to say we approved the February 28th minutes at the March 6th meeting. All right. All right. Do we have any thank you. Any comments on that? Okay. All right, so we're voting on approving the March 6th minutes as amended. Chris Campbell.
Yes.
Doug.
Yes.
Chris Delaney.
I don't know if I was here.
Let's see.
It says you're here.
Actually.
Yeah, but let's at least answer the question here.
Oh, there it is right there.
Two Chris's.
Then yes.
You were here, yes.
Yes.
Say it with more conviction. All right. Frank.
Yes.
Steve.
Yes.
Megan,
Yes.
Rob,
Yes.
Ed,
Yes.
Roger.
Yes.
Chair votes yes, that's 10-0-0. All right, that's everything that I had. Is there anything else that folks feel they need to discuss tonight? All right, then I'll just mention that our next meeting is a week from today, March 20th, that would be. And it will be a public safety night, where we'll be talking about police, fire, and the Ways and Means Reserve Fund. And I believe that is all. Very good.
Second?
Done. We're adjourned.